Helle Thorning-Schmidt addressed the Strasbourg chamber this week as Denmark's first woman Prime Minister and one of only 3 Social Democrats to lead governments in the EU today. 8 years ago, she stood alongside many here as an MEP herself. She was politically skilled and well-connected, married to the former UK Labour leader Neil Kinnock's son. But still, not many predicted such a rapid rise, and she now takes the EU's reins at a time of unprecedented crisis. Thanks for joining us. You're taking over the presidency of the EU at such a critical moment. Is it more of a challenge because Denmark is a country that's not even in the Eurozone and a small country at that, as Monsieur Sarkozy reminded you the other day, apparently?
Well, you shouldn't believe everything you read in the papers, but Denmark has been a member of the Union for many, many years. This is our 7th presidency that we are taking over. We have before led the Council in times of crisis, but of course this is the biggest crisis that we had for many, many years. And I say it very clearly that of course if you have a crisis it will inflict or it will be part of what you do as a presidency and what you can do, but we are determined. Even though we have a crisis, we are determined to produce some tangible, concrete results for Europe, because I think the European citizens are waiting for us to produce some results. They don't only want to hear about an economic crisis, they also want us to produce some results.
Well, let's talk about how those results might manifest themselves in a moment, but just back to the crisis. You've talked about growth as being a very important element. Is that part of your answer to the crisis, actually? And does that mean that, in fact, there's been too much austerity, in your view, and not enough emphasis on growth, which is what a lot of people are saying more and more now?
I think growth and discipline in our economies are not opposing each other. I feel that what we need now, perhaps than ever, is to bring back responsibility in our member states' economy. It is not because of the euro or because of Europe that we have a crisis right now. The reason why we have a crisis is because individual member states have not a sound economic situation. Then we have a situation where we have the foundation for creating new growth and new jobs in Europe. So it's not against each other to have consolidation and, on the other side, to create jobs. For me, it's 2 sides of the same coin. You have jobs and growth when you have sound and healthy economies in our member states.
Back to the presidency and the balancing act that you have to sort of perform. I mean, you're taking over the presidency of the EU, not just at a time of crisis, but also where there are quite a lot of divisions between big and small, between in and out, and between the UK, for example, and the rest. Now, are you well placed to be the bridge builder? I think you've used that phrase, that you want to be here.
In many ways, Denmark is well placed to be the bridge builder because we are not a Euro country, everyone knows that. But we are a Euro plus country, and we are, as we speak, discussing that we want to be part of this new fiscal compact as much as possible. So in that way, we are a country which is a bit in between the Euro members and the non-Euro members. And the best bridge we can create is if we are able in this presidency to take some tangible decisions. We have a situation now where it is possible for us to move ahead with a single market, to move ahead with, for example, the Energy Efficiency Directive and other directives, concrete directives. If we could take a decision, it would be a small path, a small step out of this crisis that we are in now. And I think that would be good for Europe and for the European citizens more than it.
You say that you're wanting to sign up as much as possible to this fiscal compact, which is, of course, these sort of set of rules that cause so much trouble for the UK, in fact. So you seem to be moving very much more down, wanting to be part of that Europe mainstream. Meanwhile, the UK looks like it's going to the opposite direction. I mean, how important do you think is it to get the UK back into the fold if you think they're leaving it?
Well, first of all, we have to remember that the UK is also a very valued member of the European Union. Sometimes we don't talk about it like that, but we need the UK to be part of the Union, and we all benefit from the UK being part of our union. The UK, Great Britain, is benefiting, but so is the union.
Do you think everyone feels like that? Because I get the feeling that a lot of people are beginning to lose patience with the UK.
Perhaps they are, and perhaps some parts of UK are beginning to lose patience with the union as well. But that doesn't change the fact that if the strength of the EU is that we are 27 member states, very different member states, different culture, different political systems, all these things. But what we have managed to do over all these years is to take decisions that are for the benefit of all of us. That's why we need these days not only to talk about the crisis, the economic crisis, but we need, as 27, to start making some decisions that will move us in the right direction, decisions that will create new jobs. And one of the decisions that we need to do is to finalise the internal market. And does the UK have a role to play in that context? Of course it does.
This is an institution, though, which feels itself slightly under, pressure by the increasing tendency of governments, particularly the French and the German ones, to sort of take over the running of things. Do you understand those concerns? Can you be a champion for, for that, what they call here, the community method, which basically means the elected representatives having a say in all of this? Or do you think that's not your role?
I think it is our role. It is our role as presidency to be the champion of the community method, which basically means that we are defending the rule of law in our union. A very important principle, and we will be the champion of that. We agree with the Commission, we agree with the European Parliament, and I'd like to add, as a small member state, what is important for small member states has always been the rule of law in our union. Does that mean that we want to fight with Merkel or Sarkozy? Not at all. I have the greatest respect for everyone who's taken responsibility in Europe, and I feel very strongly that those two countries, and particularly the largest country, Germany, has taken a huge responsibility in in being part of the solution in solving the crisis that we have right now. So this is not a time where we fight with each other. This is a time where we unite all forces that want to create a new situation in Europe where we have a path out of the crisis.
Thanks very much, Helle Thorning-Schmidt. Speaking to me earlier, the Danish Prime Minister, Helle Thorning-Schmidt. Now, given that she was an MEP, how might she work with members here at the European Parliament to put those ambitions into concrete results? Well, judging from the debate in the chamber after her speech, expectations are certainly running high.
Prime Minister, I think that you have one priority, and that is to find a way out in two crises that we are going through for the moment. The euro crisis at the one, and the crisis around the European values. And one thing is, I think, crystal clear, that is that the half measures that have been taken the last 2 years haven't worked.
Dänemark stammen, hat natürlich ganz besondere Erwartungen an Sie.
We have high hopes for you, not just because of your politics and because you have brought a fresh start to Denmark, but because you are a strong Scandinavian woman, and we need your energy in Europe at this time.
But there were doubters in the chamber too.
Ik heb eigenlijk nog nooit zo eerder zoveel holle retoriek en loze woorden.
I've never heard as many empty words as I heard this morning, like Mr. Barroso saying it all and saying nothing.
Well, of course, not everyone in the chamber was delighted with the Danish Prime Minister, but by and large she got a pretty good reception. To talk about that and what lies in store over the next 6 months, I'm joined by 4 members of the European Parliament. We have Fiona Hall, who leads the British Liberal Democrats in the Parliament. We have Dan Jorgenson, who leads the Danish Social Democrats, of course the party of government in Denmark. We have Mário David, who is a Portuguese centre-right MEP. Of course, your party currently in government in Portugal as well, dealing with the whole crisis there. And William Dartmouth, who is a member of the UK Independence Party, an MEP here as well. Dan Jorgenson, when we heard Guy Verhofstadt there in the chamber earlier saying to your Prime Minister, you've got one priority, actually, and that's to resolve the crisis. Do you agree with him?
I do, and I also think, actually, that the Danish Prime Minister's speech reflected that she agrees with that also, because what she said is we need a responsible Europe, by responsible, we mean a Europe that sets a clear way out of the crisis. And I think that the way she approaches this is very, very good one, because if you look at the schools of thought on this issue, how do we get out of the crisis? Well, there's the right wing of the European Parliament and the right wing governments of Europe that says, well, we need to balance the budgets using austerity measures. Then you have the Social Democrats and the left wing saying, no, we need to invest in the future, create growth and jobs. And her line, which is the compromise line, is we need both. First, we need to balance the budget, but we also know that we need to create jobs to move on. So not only is that a compromise line, I also think it's the right line.
But is it too narrow a focus, Fiona Hall, do you think, to put it like that?
I think that was a political statement of how important it is to deal with the crisis, but that's not to say that other measures aren't necessary. And the Danish presidency has always said, for example, how important it was to get the Energy Efficiency Directive through. And that's not only important in terms of cutting emissions, it's also desperately important in terms of creating jobs, because it's a huge stimulus to the economy when you do energy efficiency.
It's to make sure new buildings basically are not built without being energy efficient.
Exactly, and existing buildings are renovated. But even more important than that, looking forward to the medium term, is the fact that oil prices are going up. The Saudis have signalled that just today. And we are pouring money out of Europe at the moment that we need to be using in our own economy. So there are huge economic reasons for getting on with doing energy efficiency properly. And therefore, as a priority for the Danish presidency, that's important for the strategic solution to the current crisis.
William Dartmouth, I mean, you have a country like Denmark, which traditionally has been quite an ally of the UK, as the UK Conservative leader pointed out in the Chamber. Not an ideological sort of speech at all, quite pragmatic, talking a lot about growth and jobs, about medium and small businesses. Are you quite pleased with what you heard?
Well, no, I mean, it was actually a profoundly Euro-federalist speech. Now, the fact of the matter is that the elephant in the room is the crisis in the Eurozone. And now Standard & Poor's have downgraded 13 of the 17 Eurozone countries. And the fact of the matter is that the Eurozone crisis, that there were, in the last calendar year, there were no less than 9 summits seeking to address the Eurozone crisis.
But it's not an elephant in the room anyone was ignoring, is it? Everyone was talking about it.
They were simply an excuse to try and get more European integration. Now, that isn't the problem. It's a debt crisis. It's a potential solvency crisis for the banks. And the only thing that will solve it is if the German taxpayer guarantees the bonds of the other countries, which in practice they are highly unlikely to do.
OK, I'll come to Mário David in a minute, but let me just ask Dan quickly.
Well, the elephant in the room is not really the one that you implied it was. The elephant in the room, I'm afraid I have to say, is unfortunately the UK. Because of
I don't think that we're an elephant, I think that we're a lion, actually.
Can I just say, I find it strange that you don't acknowledge that the Danish presidency and Helle Thorning-Schmidt, our Prime Minister, is actually trying to do something about this problem. We're not saying, okay, then let the UK do whatever they want and we will isolate them. We're not saying that. We're actually saying, no, we insist that the solutions that we find are solutions for 27 members. We don't want to isolate the UK. Your Prime Minister can say whatever he wants. We need to find solutions that the British government, the British population, as well as the 26 other countries can live with. And instead of creating more conflict and criticizing, you should actually take that invitation, I think, and be a little bit more polite and acknowledge that we're actually trying to go in your direction.
Okay, briefly, Fiona, and then David.
I just want to ask you, William, have you read the Standard & Poor report? Because what they say is that what is lacking and why they have downgraded is the lack of a political initiative. In other words, they are saying they've downgraded because we need more Europe, not less Europe.
Right.
Well, that was a point that was made by Mr. Verhofstadt earlier on today. But that doesn't alter the fact, and the fact is that there is a debt crisis in the Eurozone.
Okay, Mário David, your country is living this crisis. Do you think that the prescription that you're getting from the EU at the moment to come out of it is the right one?
No, I don't. But I think that the prescription is also necessary, and I'm a medical doctor myself, so I'm used to prescription.
There you are, the analogy, the metaphor is that.
It's perfect. But as an EPP vice president and my sister party being in the opposition in Denmark, I want to praise the Prime Minister's address to the European Parliament today. I think she was perfect. And I think that she has shown solidarity, she has shown us a way, she has shown us what is the path, even if Denmark itself, it's outside the euro area, the path that we should follow.
Let me get back to the situation in Portugal.
When I praised the Prime Minister's speech, was that she didn't mention only the austerity, but as you mentioned in your introduction, she also mentioned the need to have some stimulus to the economy. Mm-hmm. You know, and in order to create growth, in order to create prosperity, in order that we can go and move forward. Because otherwise, I mean, only with austerity, we know that we won't get anywhere. But I think that it is necessary as well. I mean, this we have inherited from a socialist government.
The trouble is, though, I mean, you may not agree with his politics, but there was a Dutch member from the non-aligned group who made the fair point that again and again and again growth is mentioned, and again, nothing actually happens.
She actually had some very concrete proposals. One of them is the energy efficiency proposal that you talked about, the directive that we will have. The Commission has calculated that if we do this so that we become 20% more energy efficient than we are today, we can create 2 million jobs in Europe by 2020. 2 million jobs. That's just one directive.
But 2020 is not soon enough.
It's 2020.
Exactly. That is why I hope
I just like to make the point.
Excuse me.
I just like to make the point, if I may, that
I will not let you just be too loud this time, and then
okay, let him finish his sentence. Then you make the point. Okay, Dan, carry on.
It doesn't make your argument better that you just say it louder.
Okay.
Do you know what? That's why I hope that the right wing of the Parliament will stop trying to object to this directive. We need it going as fast as possible so that we can get the jobs as fast as possible.
Okay.
Well, I think the elephant in the room is actually the debt crisis. But I just make this point that if the Danish presidency was serious about growth, they would be supporters of labour deregulation. What we've actually had in the Parliament is we had the Temporary Workers Directive, which just came in October last year, which will cost hundreds of thousands of jobs throughout Europe.
Okay, let me move on about the role...
So they actually aren't serious about growth.
Let me move on to the role of the Parliament in this crisis specifically, because sometimes one has the feeling that these words are sort of shouted into a vacuum, and in the end the Parliament is really struggling to make itself relevant in this crisis.
I don't think so, because I think that Parliament is as much engaged as any other institution in order to find a way out of the crisis as soon as possible. What we want is to have stability, what we want is to have prosperity, what we want is to have growth that could create jobs. I think that both Commission and Council knows that we can provide the support that they want in terms of legitimacy and so on, and therefore I think we should get more engaged. Even if I disagree, for instance, with the proposal we heard today, on the fact that, for instance, that the Parliament or the President of Parliament should represent Parliament at ECOFIN or Eurozone finance ministers meeting.
You don't think the President should be there?
No, I think the President should be in all kinds of summits, be it of the Eurozone ones or the European Councils.
But this is also about the rights of the Member States. We've just voted today in the European Parliament that we demand that all countries, all 27 countries, are part of the process, are part of the ECOFIN meetings, are part of the discussions where we make decisions on the future of the Eurozone, even if the countries are not members of the Eurozone, because the decisions made there goes for all countries, also the UK. And this is just what I'm asking for you to acknowledge, that this is actually a very good thing, and that might be an advantage that we have a small country that's not a member of the Eurozone itself, which is Denmark, to argue this case, even though we don't agree with UK on everything.
Do you think, I mean, the UK, exactly, I mean, the UK has found itself rather out of the fold these days, Fiona. Do you think that the Parliament has a role, do you in the Parliament have a role to sort of building the bridges and bringing the UK back in?
I think some of the measures that are coming forward, like the Capital Financing Directive, where there are amendments down to help small businesses by underwriting some of the loans that banks would give, because small businesses are risky for banks, so we have to find a way of helping banks to lend to small businesses. It's actually that nitty-gritty stuff, which is what we deal with in a quiet way in the Parliament on a day-to-day basis, which is actually the bedrock of getting out of the crisis.
I mean, just to go back to the role of the UK, Daniel, I mean, Helle Thorning-Schmidt did make a point of saying how much the UK is important to the EU, to her, in the interview she did with us earlier. And yet, when it came to it that night in December, Denmark wasn't sticking up for the UK at all. Nobody was, actually.
Well,
so how important is the UK
to say that we want everybody on board is not the same as saying that all countries can then just make whatever demands, as crazy as they might be, and then we'll just do it. That obviously doesn't work like that, and none of us were present at the meeting, so we don't know what Cameron proposed. But, you know, when you read about it in the papers, it's pretty clear that these things we could have never accepted. What we're trying to do, what the Danish presidency is trying to do, is simply to say it is not in the interest of any country in the European Union if we have a divided Europe. We need a Europe that sticks together. Now, can we exclude that we will have solutions that will mean that some countries go further than others? No, we cannot exclude that, but we need to work as hard as we can of preventing that happening.
Mario?
I'm going to be politically incorrect, but
be my guest.
My reading from the continent, looking at Britain, I think that everyone now has realized that the solution for this crisis is more Europe. And this is what the Conservative Party doesn't want. And therefore, I think that, to a big regret of our Liberal friends, they are trying to find ways, which is legitimate, but they are trying to find ways of finding an excuse to get out of the Union as it is now. Right? And unfortunately, we have the European economic space who can be, in the end of the day, very appealing to them. I wish they would stay with us. Because I don't think NAFTA will enlarge in order to incorporate Britain. But I wish they would stay with us. But to stay with us means to share our values, to share the good things, and to also to share our deeds.
Okay.
And in the end of the day, I mean, the pound, in a couple of years, the euro will pass this crisis. The next target will be the pound, and then you'll find yourselves the Brits without any friends around.
That's a scary thought.
It isn't the British Conservative Party, it's the British people. It's about 50% would like to get out of the European Union.
So what about the other 50%?
The last poll that came out was 18% said yes and 22% undecided.
Very briefly, Fiona, I think you need to give your perspective on this. Mario.
First of all, William, whether you like it or not, the UK's economy is inextricably linked with the Eurozone, and it is absolutely essential for the future prosperity of the UK that the Eurozone crisis is resolved and that we have a strong partner in the single market that we can trade with. That is worth trillions of pounds to the UK.
Okay. We certainly want the Eurozone.
Let Fiona finish her point. Let Fiona finish her point.
I shall bring earplugs next time. Next, let us just kill once and for all this idea that somehow the answer is that the UK goes into an economic area as a sort of super Norway. The point just has to be repeated that if you are in the economic area, you take European legislation as it is decided by the other 26 member states. Remember that Norway is known as the fax democracy, and therefore this idea that somehow you can have your cake and eat it by being in the economic area and not part of the legislation is 100% false, and we just need to kill that once and for all. I'm sick of hearing it being repeated because it's completely wrong.
Subscribe what Fiona said.
On that note, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much, all of us. Let's have a look now, though, at what else has been going on in this very eventful first session of 2012. It all kicked off with MEPs electing a new president. A deal between the main political groups delivered German Social Democrat Martin Schulz a comfortable majority, taking over from Polish Jerzy Buzek. Two UK MEPs also stood, Conservative Nirj Diva and Liberal Democrat Diana Wallis, who has since resigned after 12 years as an MEP. Hungary's controversial Prime Minister was in Strasbourg this week. Viktor Orban asked to appear after the European Commission started legal action over Hungary's new constitution. Mr. Orban told MEPs this could easily be remedied. But many in the Parliament want to go further than the Commission.
European values are democracy and good governance, but what you're pursuing is preventing that.
As Italian investigators explore the causes of last week's Costa Concordia disaster, the European Commission and MEPs promised a review of EU maritime safety rules.
If it is a disaster, you inevitably then get this reassessment of the regulations that we've got, and I think that will happen.
And new laws to force a radical improvement in how much electronic waste is recycled were agreed by MEPs. EU governments have also approved the plans. Now they'll have to work much harder to meet the targets.
It is not junk. It is a general awareness problem in the European Union, in every country, that they understand waste is not junk, waste are raw material. And a lot of people try to make money with that.